Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the next session, which is the panel Q&A. I'm Keith Wallace. I'm the Service Director for Vestas in UK and Ireland, and I'm also the Vice Chair of SafetyOn. So, hopefully this morning's presentations, you'll have heard a lot about what we've been doing in SafetyOn in the last year, and likely have some questions. So this is really the chance for you to be able to find out a little bit more detail and maybe a little bit more depth of understanding on maybe some very specific topics. And also I'd say your input is really important to us, because I think the feedback from last year's event was that we got some very useful guidance coming from questions and discussions from the audience. And obviously this year we're going to have to try even harder to do it with not being able to meet in person, but certainly find different ways by which we get that. But certainly the feedback was really important, and I know often through this year people have referred back to points being raised at last year's event. So I think it certainly helped us through the last 12 months in being able to steer and direct some of the work programs and some of the feeling that was coming from people from that particular event. So it is a really important event, and I think certainly the Q&A section to it is an important one for us to be able to do that. So on the panel, so I think you've seen the list of people on the panel. So if we go into the next slide there. On the panel today we've got Hugh McNeil. I'll maybe just go through it again. Hugh McNeil, who's Chief Executive for Renewables UK and also sits on the leadership board of SafetyOn. We've got Trevor Johnson, who's the Principal Inspector at the HSE. Gordon McDougall, who's the Managing Director of BayWa and also a Tier 2 member of SafetyOn. And Ian McCallum, who's the Head of HSQE at RES in UK and Ireland and sits on the TAC Committee. And I think what we're going to do is also maybe bring in a couple of the other people who have been speaking today, us, and when we go along on some of the questions, to be able to pick on some particular points. We've got a number of questions that were asked in advance, and what we'll do is we'll go through those and answer those. And then we've got questions that have been coming in on the fly here. So as we've been going along, I think what's been really good is seeing the presentations that we've had so far have certainly prompted a few questions. So, this is the bit that maybe we'll be jump around a little bit. So please bear with us as maybe we'll jump around and multitask a little bit as we collate together the questions that we've got together with the advanced questions, and hopefully we'll do the best we can to answer those questions as we go along. And hopefully we've got 3/4 of an hour for this session, and we've got plenty of material to go out here of what we've got already. So that's my intro. So I think the best thing to do is we'll get straight into it, and like I say, we'll be flying by the seat of our pants a little bit, but I think that's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I'll start off. The first question we've got is really about what would you say was the biggest learnings you take away from 2020, and how do you think this may be impacting health and safety across the industry? And I'll sort of give you my thoughts on that first, and then I'll ask the other guys on the panel to chip in on that. For me, one of the biggest learnings for me and investors has certainly been about learning to be resilient. And I think which is really important. We've had multiple headwinds come at us in 2020 so far. I think as now onshore wind is such a significant part of onshore power generation, we have to, we are big time, and therefore we have to be able to cope with it, and I think we've certainly proved it this year, with COVID, with the growth that we've had, a lot of new construction taking place. And certainly, we've seen really good signs of people stepping up in face of all these multiple headwinds, and certainly showing a lot of resilience. In terms of the safety impacts, one of the things we've seen is maybe some concerns around complacency, and we've certainly seen that, and maybe sometimes people using COVID as an excuse, where it's not an either-or situation, it's both, having to maintain general safety and as well as maintaining COVID guidance. It's not a either or. And certainly we definitely saw some complacency, particularly with maybe not the same kind of level of auditing and on the ground line management taking place. So I think we've certainly seen actions taking place as we've gone along to be able to address that. But certainly there's been a lot of creativity. I think the situation and the challenges this year, I think for me, have certainly shown people across the industry step up and maybe do some different things. And that is certainly a lesson to be learned for the future in terms of how we turn that around, how we use these challenges to learn from them and be more creative. So I think that's my sort of view on the situation, and maybe jump across to we've got Ian. Maybe Ian on next on the panel. We've got
Keith. Ian's not got his camera on right now.
Okay, no problem. So David was there. So maybe I know David. Why don't you jump in as an impromptu? So David was on the panel there.
Okay. Yeah, kind of from a 2020 point of view, I kind of agree with you with the, I think kind of it's worth kind of noting the solutions that a lot of kind of members and other organisations have came up with to overcome some of the kind of problems we've got now. And kind of, I mentioned earlier on about the kind of camera system, what we're doing today, virtual events, virtual ways of meeting with each other and all that kind of thing as well. I'd be very keen for kind of all the things that are working, all the good kind of examples of this to kind of remain once we're kind of past this. I mean, also it's maybe worth noting as well, there's a lot of thing in the press now about vaccines and potentially there's light at the end of the tunnel. But, within my organisation, we're recognising it is important that it's not finished yet. After the festive break, we've got we've still got concerns. We need to keep the standards going. We need to keep our performance where it is at the moment until we are vaccinated, until we are kind of getting back to normal kind of thing. But, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Gordon, have you got any comments there, Gordon?
Yeah, no, thanks. I guess one thing that really struck me during 2020, and particularly when we're talking in a kind of a health and safety context, is, we always talk about health and safety and our obligation to work safely and to kind of work that way. But I think 2020 has been different, but unless we can demonstrate that, we're not actually entitled to work at all. And I think that's a good lesson that we take through, that, at all times we shouldn't be working unless we can work safely. And 2020 has been that one strange year where, everything was shut down until we could demonstrate we're working safely. So I think that's a good lesson. It's a good kind of standard for us to maintain in everything we do.
I'm here again, Keith.
Yeah, hi. Yeah. Could you chip in there, Ian? Have you got some comments?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key things that's come out, particularly of COVID, is the importance of people's well-being and looking after people's well-being. I think it's been a very hard year for a lot of people who maybe having to work from home, looking after kids, maybe stuck in a flat, don't have a garden. And it's been, I think, understanding and compassionate towards these people in these situations. Also, people in the field who are working, families will be maybe worried about, are they going to be in a situation where they pick up the virus and so forth. So I think it's understanding all of these particular issues, and certainly for me, people's well-being and the importance of human contact when you don't have it is really important, and it's something that I think we should certainly not lose sight of as we come out of COVID.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ian. And Hugh, have you got any?
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that's been said. I have to say, sort of mental health issues have been on my mind an awful lot this year as I've thought about my small team here and just how do we, my legal obligations, but my moral obligations to them all, and how do we get them how do we give people space, and how do we make sure they get out and see some sunshine if it's ever sunny again. And so those things are obviously true. I think there's a couple of other things I'd want to add. And I suppose I'm quite reflective now as I'm about to leave this role in a few months' time and my time with the industry. It's about 12 years now. Many of you will have been around a bit longer than that. But the first thing I'd add is the work that was done in terms of the guidance, and I know we'll talk about that, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later, is as good a bit of collaboration across our industry as I can remember. And, you know, that was really, really pleasing to see, because SafetyOn was still quite young at the moment that this hit. So I'd want to stress that. Shows what can be achieved when we collaborate together. And I suppose that leads to the second point I'd want to make, which is that we're about to enter a really exciting time for onshore wind in terms of the market opportunities, I think. All right, we're going to have an auction next year. We're going to have competitive pressures that come from that. If you place that within the context of what's going on with renewables more generally, if you think about multi-technology energy parks, if you think about what's happening with offshore wind as well, we're moving from an industry where, when I was first involved in it, you know, I hope you don't mind me putting it like this, we were sort of people who wore sandals, right? We weren't really taken very seriously. Now we're about to become incumbents. And so now it's not just going to be about our legal obligations or our moral obligations. We're going to be quite rightly in the firing line. We're going to be held up to the very, very highest standards all the time under even greater scrutiny. And that's right, and we should embrace that, but we need to be ready for it, given that there's going to be this competitive pressure. We're going to be such an important part of net zero. So in my mind, the thing I wanted to try and land in this little session this morning was that, you know, we're not going to just be talking to ourselves. It's not just going to be ourselves who, you know, others are going to be putting greater scrutiny on us, and we should embrace that. And SafetyOn is in a great position now to really grow. So that's my reflections. But I completely agree with everyone else. The mental health issues and how we look after our people and how we think about our people has been an important part of what's otherwise been an incredibly challenging and often tragic year.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Hugh. And I hope they were safety sandals you used to wear in those days. Okay, I'll move quickly on to the next. The next question was, what deliverable in SafetyOn's 2020 work program has been most valuable to industry? Where could we have been more active, and what can we learn from 2021? And maybe I'll just ask Trevor if he could maybe give us some insights there from his perspective, sort of looking from the outside in on SafetyOn. That's okay.
Absolutely. Now, I hope you can hear me. I mean, I think this year's been really interesting for the onshore wind industry. And in a way, I've been listening to today's event. Now, I'm actually more positive than I was before the event started, and there's good reason for that. Now, you can see a lot of work that's being done, but to me, the key came from Lindsay just before we broke for a break, when she sort of said that health and safety has to be core of all the decisions that we make in the industry. And to me, this is a really important step forward, because it goes to show we now change that narrative from health and safety being a cost to health and safety being an investment. And it's about investing in our people. And by doing that, we become a more efficient industry. And it's really pleasing to hear that. And then you sort of build upon what Fiona said in her session about, and the link between fatigue with health, with safety, with productivity, and with well-being. And again, it's really pleasing. We're starting to move the argument forward. And I think once we do that, and as we do that and further in the journey, then the industry will become more efficient and it will become more safer as people understand the benefits of treating health and safety properly.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's really good feedback there. And maybe if I could ask Ian, if you could maybe comment on this particular question about the work program.
Yeah, I think the fact that in year one we've had such an extensive program was certainly up there for me. But I think one that is of value is the emergency response work program that's delivered the guidance that I think will help create a consistency across the industry. And when people go from site to site, they will basically be finding the same things, the same way to respond, and just brings that consistency. And I think it was a great collaboration to use words earlier on. That we definitely that is one area that I think is will add great value to the industry as we as we create a consistency across the industry.
Great, thanks, Ian. Yeah, and Gordon, has you got any comments there as well? You're on mute there, Gordon.
Apologies. So I was just going to say, if I'm looking back,
it's the phrase of the year. You're on mute.
Most people want me on mute. I was going to say, I think if I was looking back in 2020, I'd probably, hopefully not remember it too well, but I think when we do look back, we'll obviously remember it for everything that's been around the COVID, the shutdowns and lockdown. And I think certainly the big piece that will always stick in my mind for what SafetyOn really did deliver on was getting us all back to work safely, getting the industry to move together and do that. And I think that was a fantastic representation of what the industry can do. And I think in all levels that was a great piece of work and a great representation for the entire industry to come out of that. So I was very delighted to be a benefactor of that, a participant to it, and I think it was the right thing, and certainly for me the highlight for SafetyOn this year.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gordon. Maybe just one comment from me. I think the getting going on the data collection for me, I think is really important for the future. For the long-term future. Because I think as individual companies, I think often our safety data is maybe not as always statistically relevant, but when we pull that all together, I think we then start to build a database and a sense of what really truly are the hazards. So I think I'm quite interested in that. I think that's been quite a good step for us this year. So just keep the pace going because I've got a lot of questions to go here. So this is related to Tier 2 membership, and I'll also maybe jump in on some of the questions that we've got in as we've been going. And there's a question really about how do you as a company benefit from being a Tier 2 member, and what benefits for other stakeholders down the supply chain. I'll ask Gordon that question first as a newer Tier 2 member, and then maybe I'll probably just flip across and I'll just read the question again that we've got online, but you can answer that question first, Gordon. I think that'll be really insightful for your views on Tier 2 membership.
Yeah, no, happy to. I mean, I think we were delighted to become a Tier 2 member. I think we're a company that's been growing quite rapidly over the last couple of years in the UK, and I guess I could answer what's the benefits in many different levels. The most serious one, you could say, looking at the companies that are all members, we want to see our name there and be a member of that, but that would be entirely the wrong reasons for membership. I think we're a company that, in our ethos, everything we want to do is put people first. We're a people before profit company. Everything's around that. So we see it as not just a kind of a benefit of being a member, it's our duty to contribute to this. And it's a privilege to be a part of it in terms of bringing everything through for the industry. And I think it's the common theme we'll get a lot of this is that consistency for approach, consistency for the way the industry works. All the companies we are working with, we're all interacting. I think it's very important that we are consistent. We've got a very high standard, so we want to be part of that. We want to be seen to be part of it. We benefit from being part of it. And so I would see it as being our duty to be part of it, and my duty to make sure our company is contributing to it. And it's also a privilege to be part of it as well. So that gives us, I like the way you put it earlier, the moral obligation. It's our moral obligation to be part of this, to contribute to the industry as well, because it's a small industry. We are becoming more mainstream, but we've also got a duty to continue really good work we've done.
Yeah, I completely agree with that from Gordon. Sorry to cut across you, but just to sort of do a bit of interaction, because obviously the development of Tier 2 membership, when we originally set up SafetyOn, I was going to set up a separate working group to catch the tail of people who wouldn't be able to afford to be SafetyOn members. But because we've developed Tier 2, we're going to do something slightly different. So we're going to build that into our supply chain working group. And it sort of comes back to this same point. We're going to be under competitive pressure. We're going to have to work with our supply chains and listen to them, keep them safe, but also learn from them to keep us safe. And so what's wonderful to see as SafetyOn develops is, if you like, I've got to be careful how I put this, and I can be quite clumsy, as you all know, but it hasn't felt quite like the exclusive club that perhaps when it started G Plus felt. We've learned from our G Plus colleagues, and we've reached out into the wider supply chain, and making sure that the core messages and the activities that we're engaged in are collaborative. including in days like today. And I think that is why Tier 2 membership is important. That's also, excuse me, don't mind the plug, why those of you that are members of RUK, I hope will also get involved in our supply chain working group to talk about health and safety issues too. And it does fit with, this reaction to the instinctive idea, which is wrong, that we're going to race to the bottom as we come under this competitive pressure. It's going to be the opposite. We're going to move towards standardization. We're going to drive innovation. We're going to make our people safer and healthier.
And just to pick up, I totally agree with what you're just saying there, Hugh, through that supply chain part. I think we're all, we can take the view many of us are competitors and what are we doing, but the one thing we don't do is compete in health and safety. Well, we are driving to take cost out, well, we are doing all of that. Health and safety isn't something I consider adding to my bottom line. There's only one bottom line in health and safety for me, and that's nobody gets hurt, everybody goes home safely. And in that, we're all in it together.
Thanks, Gordon. I'll maybe just add, while we're on the theme of Tier 2, I'd maybe ask David if you could just maybe some comments on this question that came in, which it would be good to extend the Tier 2 membership. What help or support do you think the current Tier 2 members need from SafetyOn to promote SafetyOn membership benefits, as peer-to-peer encouragement is usually an effective method?
So, so, I mean, this is a good, I think the best kind of drive we've got for people joining was very much organisations reaching out to their own supply chain members, Tier 1 members reaching out to their own supply chain, saying, have you heard about this and all that kind of thing there. Part of the work plan that we've maybe not spoke about for 2021 is there's this ongoing communications work programme that SafetyOn runs. We're looking at, for example, a brochure type newsletter coming out in the new year. Other kind of systems there where we've constantly got the touch points there. We also work with the kind of RUK as well as that kind of that point as well, kind of reaching out to the who we qualify as Tier 2 and beyond that as well. So yeah, there are, as I say, it's something that we continuously look at is how we do communicate kind of side of it, steer people towards the website. It's on the website how you would join, and again, yeah, just kind of working with our own supply chains and kind of see it.
Could I just add something quickly, Keith? I think it's benefit as a stakeholder as a Tier 1 organisation is the value that the Tier 2 organisations will bring to the work streams. So in traffic management, we'll get Ricky from Barrows and we'll get Alan McKeon from One Stop Wind on that group, and I think that adds great value. So it's not just about Tier 1 down to Tier 2, it's about Tier 2 up to Tier 1 and the contribution that we all can make.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's really valuable because I think there's a couple of questions that have come in related to the engagement of Tier 2 members. And I don't know if either you guys on the TAC can maybe also add this. Are Tier 2 members invited to these work streams, or is there a sign-up process? And then there's a second question that's come in. I would like to know what more we can do as Tier 2 to collaborate and help the Tier 1 businesses. At the moment, I don't feel we bring any benefit to Tier 1 or support, but we have the ability to add a lot of this. And so I think, again, there's a common theme there around how do we then help this. I don't know if either Ian or David can maybe add a bit more about this, getting involved in work streams, which is part of the key for what we really wanted out of Tier 2 as well.
I agree. I completely agree with the points that were made there with the question. Working under suspended laws as an example, that workshop involved the entire industry, stakeholders from across that kind of activity, and we wouldn't have got the level of input if we didn't have, your lifting contractors. I mean, if it was essentially OEMs, clients, and service providers, it wouldn't have been as successful. It was getting that point of view from everyone else. From an engagement point of view, I'm completely honest. At the moment, we are engaging with Tier 2 people that we see as Tier 2 organisations that we see as would be able to benefit from the kind of the work streams that we've got going on. Just try to think at the moment, Ian might be throwing you under the bus here at the moment, but traffic management, there is plans to kind of bring Tier 2 into the traffic management work stream, isn't it?
Yes, as I was saying, we've got Ricky from Farron's who sits on it, and from One Stop Wind, we've got Alan McKeon's. So they were, it was a combination of we reached out and they reached out, and it's good to have them on board because I think they bring, it gives us a much more rounded view of what happens with traffic management. rather than just tier one dictating to tier two, and vice versa. So I think it's going to be a great collaboration that will bring out, I think, the best in the industry. Without over egging it. So I'm really looking forward to it. It means we'll get it right because we've involved all the right people. That's the important thing for me.
Yeah, and I would just pick up one comment on that and probably reiterate the one you made. It's very important that the ethos continues to be it's not an exclusive club. Everybody's involved. Everyone's got a role to play. Like any risk assessment we do internally, you always kind of get a risk to be managed by the person best placed to manage and understand that risk. And if that's the tier two members, that's the tier two members. So I think that ethos is very, very important.
Yeah, and I suppose so. There's a couple of things that are worth saying about that. So obviously G+ learned from its experience. I should have said that when I made my earlier comment, right? So one of the most impressive events I saw on the offshore side was at a G+ stakeholder event in Holland a few years ago. It was fantastic. So it's worth making that point. I would hope that as the work program for next year is made public to everyone, that basically what Ian just described is how we work. That people who think they can contribute to help us get these work streams over the line and make them better, put themselves forward from the tier two membership, and we embrace them. Which sounds, Ian, like it's happening on the traffic management side, and hopefully can happen across all of the work streams next year. But that seems ideal.
Absolutely, because we've now got a rounded. We've got RES, we've got Energy Institute, we have Vestas, we have banks, Farron's, and One Stop Wind, as well as support from a consultant at Mark McDonald. So it's very rounded, and I think it'll get that's the way to get the best results for the industry.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's great, guys. Thanks. Yeah, I'd maybe just jump on to. I know we had a really good presentation there about the human factors, and maybe we had a question regarding that. And maybe I could have asked Trevor if he could give some comments to that. We had a question about how can human factors, including occupational stress, fatigue, emotional health, best be monitored, and how is it or how can it be integrated into the SafetyOn data risk profile? I'm just wondering, interested to get your view on that, Trevor, regarding human factors.
Well, the first point I would make is I think for us as a regulator, fatigue is going to be one of our priority topics going forward for many reasons. So it is important. And I do recognise that it is sort of a complex issue, as was discussed before. So I suppose as a starting point, our view is that organisations should have a sort of fatigue management sort of policy and procedures and the like. And me and my team will start to look at that. So I think that is an important part of it. I think the reference to recording things, I think this is important because what we found is that on some sites, people are working very long night shifts and continual night shifts, and that's no wonder the mistakes were being made. So it is important that you record when people are working and how people are working and how many hours people are working. But also there's sometimes additional risk factors will come into play. So for instance, if lifts are not working on turbines, then people will be climbing more. And that becomes another risk factor which needs to be taken into account. And again, I think it's actually relatively straightforward to record that so that you can start to build up a picture which helps you to develop your risk management policy and procedures. So again, I just think it's really important, and recording is one of the keys to that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's good insight for us. I'll jump on to some questions in relation to the emergency response guidance arrangements we've put out there recently, and maybe ask a couple of the guys to comment on that. And in addition to that, we've had some questions or some points raised around emergency response that people are particularly interested in that topic. So I just wondered, maybe Ian, have you got any sort of thoughts on or your views on our emergency response guidance that was published?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier. I think it offers a consistent approach for the industry. I think it focuses the industry on that area, especially start to plan for it rather than when it happens. What do we do? The guidance here will support and help. But the important thing for me is that the fact that it starts on that journey for a consistent approach. across the onshore wind industry.
And plan and drill, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You do it all beforehand, so you know how it runs if you ever face that situation. And that if people just want to take one message away from it, that's the crucial thing.
And that's the time for it all to fall apart, not during an emergency. That's when you want it,
Yeah, and there was the comment was also related to the fact that it was jumping around here so I can find it. But that's really good. Yeah, that's what it was. We constantly see wind farms next door to each other with different O&M contractors. Reluctance to call upon these companies to assist in rescue, and it's probably and have agreement with various companies across the industry. I don't know, David, if you got any or Gordon, sort of any views on that in this sort of cross collaboration across farms? If we've got maybe the point being there, if we've got a common standard related to emergency response, does that make it easier to be able to do that?
Absolutely, and I think everybody's seeing that kind of prepare and drill, the kind of consistency. That's really what makes a huge difference. If in an emergency or an emergency situation, the last thing anyone wants to be doing is working out whose rules are they working under, whose procedure. The more they're the same, the more we can run straight into it. We are a small industry. There is a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of cross collaboration and contracting. We're probably one degree of separation around this industry between who's doing what, how we work with each other. I think that consistency around this area is absolutely key and is a huge benefit. And in many ways, it'd be daft not to have it, but it's really good that we have it and we're continuing to improve it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Maybe just pick up on a questions related to mental health. I know we've talked about it a few times, and maybe just be interested to know when we met last year. I mean, we talked about mental health. Given the pressures of COVID, can the panel provide insight into how mental health has been managed over this year, and what lessons can we share? I'm just wondering if Ewan, I know in Scottish Power you've done a lot of work on this. I'm just wondering if Ewan would be able to share maybe a couple of comments there on that topic.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got yeah.
Maybe even video too. It's a complicated subject, and I'm not meaning that just to be flippant about it. I mean, I guess since March, Scottish Power's experience, not just Scottish Power Renewables experience, has been keeping moving, I guess, being aware of what's happening in the wider UK and the various countries within the UK that we operate, and trying to give a bit more certainty to staff in many respects. That's one thing I would say. You can't give absolute certainty, but our communicating. We're lucky to be a bit of the scale we've got. We're lucky to be able to do these weekly communications. So we built a microsite, and our occupational health team, again, lucky to have an head of occupational health, and although not permanent company doctors, we do have access to clinicians. So we're lucky in that respect. So I'm very conscious of speaking as a large corporate here. But there are small things that can be done by every organisation. So the other thing we did do quite early on before COVID was, several years ago now actually, set up the concept of mental health first aiders. Now I know that rather than a top-down or bottom-up approach, peer-to-peer works really well, as I saw in some of the comments earlier. And what we're finding is just quietly, the mental health first aiders have been quite a powerful resource, I would say, just dealing with issues and support. So that in many respects, the kind of very formal approach that sometimes companies have that can do, that doesn't work very well, looks very good and very, very finished, but maybe doesn't quite hit the mark. I would say the mental health first aid is a way to go for all organisations, and you scale it to the size of your organisation and scale it to the risks that you're bearing. So I guess there's a couple of points. I mean, regular communication, we've been doing that almost weekly actually, through our company chief executive, but then the business chief executive, so in SPR's case, Lindsay McQuaid, and also that's through our microsite, keeping abreast of the changes in the rules and guidance, which is no mean feat because we operate in every part of the United Kingdom, and also the bit I would advise or encourage everybody to do is think about mental health first aiders, because we're all very good at doing the first aid bit, but maybe a bit less good on having resource. And you might just find when you tap into your organisations, people are quite voluntary about that sort of thing. They actually put themselves forward. It's amazing, actually. Well, I was amazed how proactive people have been about joining that squad, if you like. So there would be a couple of remarks I would make.
Yeah. Keith, just on that, Keith, really quick for us. We've noticed that, it's keeping that communication with the staff really important, but it needs to be regular. And I appreciate that, staff, your employees, they change their minds. A lot of our staff said, oh, we're desperate to go into the office, when we get a chance, we're going to go into the office. And then we've done another follow-up with them, and it completely 180. It was a completely different message coming out from staff. Don't want to do it anymore. We also noticed an increase in concerns around mental health when the second spike happened and the second set of lockdowns happened as well. So it's just really important, maybe once a month maybe isn't enough. Maybe you are looking at very regular, because having the door open all the time doesn't work either. People are not inclined to approach you and say, I'm having problems here. Whereas if you give what we do, we use a pulse form, and if people fill that in, that gives us some really useful information to kind of base our approach for mental health within the business.
Yeah. Thanks, David. And any others maybe want to comment on?
Yeah. I was going to say, Keith, we've tried our best to many of these initiatives as we can across our business, and I guess the one thing, just as David was touching on, you kind of got to draw people into it. And the one thing, sort of doing outreach things, it's hard to get that to the right recipient. And I think my concern would be, as a society as a whole, next year we actually begin to understand really what the implications of mental health have been. And I think we've done all the proactive things we can during this year. I think next year, as people start to maybe some of these things materialise, it's about how we react to that and how we support once people are coming back and how things move forward. So it's never a job done, and I think it's going to be an ongoing area for us. And I think how we maybe look after people as they return and maybe have difficulties is going to be key.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Trevor, were you say something there, Trevor?
No, I think it was me.
Yeah.
No, I would just say we certainly we ran a kind of well-being week the other week, and out of that there's going to be some continuation of some of the more people things more people are more interested in. We did some yoga classes, people from home, and one of the successful ones was having a kind of coffee break thing where we kind of randomly put people from all across the organisation together to have a conversation for half an hour on anything they wanted to. So it was a kind of breakout session and just encouraging people to talk to other people and even think about the people you have your coffee machine chats with. Just continue to talk to them as well, not just say me as the boss or anything like that. So a whole bunch of things I think we're trying. Some work better than others, but certainly it's something I think we've got to continue doing, especially through winter and into January once we get beyond Christmas. So we're going to kind of continue with some of the successful things we did there in the longer term. So.
Keith, I agree with everything that everyone has said. I suppose I've got one thing that hasn't been said. I think the pulse survey thing is really important. We've just started to do that finally, should have done it ages ago, and that gives you anonymous data. People know it's safe. And goes through, even for us, it goes through an HR person, and you can just get a sense of what's really going on. It draws people out. All of the other initiatives, we're trying to do similar things. The thing that struck me is I've had to think about where people live. Right? It's all very well saying we can work at home if you've got a house and you've got a strong broadband connection. It's much harder if you are on your own, away from family, in a house share with 3 or 4 other people who you may not even know that well. You just moved into it. A couple of cases in our team just before this all began, and the experience will be very different. And I just think we have to be alive to being able to distinguish different types of our employees and the people we have responsibility for and the pressures that they may feel. It's all very well saying work at home. It's harder if you're in a flat with loads of people all over you.
Okay. It's a very good point here. I think one thing we did around that was we were semi-closing the offices and we were saying that, you can have very limited numbers in down to the 10 or 15% of usual capacity, the prioritisation around that was not actually on business needs, it was around mental health needs and providing a safe workspace for people to come in. And I think reprioritising that way was quite important for us.
Completely agree.
And Trevor, just wondering, Trevor, if you had any sort of views on it from a regulator perspective around mental health?
Yeah, not only from a regulatory perspective, but also from an individual perspective as well, because we've dealt with the same as yourself, working at home, and I listen to everything that's been said and agree. The one thing that we've done as a team is try to be flexible over our hours of work as well. And in particular, what we've tried to encourage is people to take long lunch, so that during the winter days they can go for a walk during the daylight hours. And that, today is really fabulous in the snow, but the reality is it is good to get outside, got some fresh air, and all of that. So we as a team have done things to look after our own well-being and mental health and the like. And it's pleasing to hear people sort of talk about people being individuals and needing to treat people as individuals and keeping in touch. Because as a regulator, that's what we would like people to do.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, okay. Now we're just sort of drawing to the end of this session, and about what we'd like. I've got one question left, which I'd like all the members of the panel could maybe use as their sort of finishing up sort of question. Hopefully that will keep us bang on time. Yeah, it's really around the future, and I think it says, renewables, onshore wind will play a significant role in broader decarbonisation of industry. Development, construction, and operations will increase significantly in the next decade. What challenges should we be preparing for today, including ensuring the supply chain is sustained for the long term? And maybe Trevor, could you maybe give us your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And again, it is pleasing that we're talking about the industry expanding again, and that's really good news. But with that does come the consequence of where are we going to get the technicians from, where are we going to get the skilled people from, and the like. So going forward, I think one of the big challenges will be the recruitment of the right people into the industry, and that in a sense will also be based upon it being a safe industry, because people will want to come into a safe industry. But then when they come into the industry, making sure they are sort of given the right training, the right experiences to become competent to the work and to work safe and efficiently within the industry. And the other thing I would just add is the industry is now getting older, and I do have this sort of feeling that some health issues are going to creep along that we've not really noticed before. So maybe it'll be sort of musculoskeletal or something like that. I don't know, but I do think we need to be sort of vigilant towards health issues as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, and Hugh, comments from yourself.
So I sort of said this in my opening remarks, Keith. So apologies, but I guess I've got two things which sort of repeat, but I'd like to land with people. I think the first is we're going to be part of incumbency, right? On our data, there's 30 gigawatts of onshore. If you think about repowering as well, by the end of the decade, 35 by 35, we'll have a number like that. So we are going to be taking off again in one way or another. And that combination of competitive pressure, which I touched on earlier, means we're going to have to standardise more. But what gives me hope, and what I'm really upbeat about, and hopefully that's come across, is the collaboration of organisations like this, and the collaboration we've been talking about between Tier 1 and Tier 2 members, and hopefully my organisation as it goes forward. So I'm really excited about that. And the second point is that we're no longer going to be a single technology industry. I don't feel I represent single technology companies anymore. You're going to be doing multiple technologies at the same site. There are regulatory issues around that. There are going to be health and safety issues around that, around the development of energy parks or the equivalents of those. And we need to work through all of those together. But I'm incredibly upbeat and optimistic for the future of our industry. I think we're in a brilliant shape, and for this organisation too.
Thanks, Hugh. That's great. Gordon?
Yeah, kind of hold on that a little bit. I mean, for me, it's been a pleasure kind of coming through this industry as it's growing up, and as Hugh's pointing out, we're now very mainstream. And I think as we move into that mainstream, I think the big thing for me is not to forget that we did used to wear sandals, that we are an industry that prides ourselves in being moral and socially conscious, and that we continually sort of remember those firm roots, that they're really good sort of pillars for us as we go into the future. Not to forget them, continue to collaborate around things like this. And, I think what SafetyOn's achieved is something for those who've really led it to be very proud of, and for the whole industry to be proud of. So I think we continue in that kind of collaborative way would be great.
Yeah, thanks. Ian?
Yeah, just really to echo what everybody else is saying, I think when we talk about sustainability, people tend to typically think about the environment, but when it comes to sustainability, the resource is human. And it's really, looking ahead, we think about the design of the infrastructures we have and the competence of people to ensure that, they can be maintained and actually we're actually improving the kind of workplace so that people can work safely. And as hybrid sites possibly come in, then we need, again, that competence area needs to come in. We might have people working on multiple sort of lost my focus. Multiple disciplines, whether it be storage or turbine or solar. So again, that I think is just really where we need to keep an eye on things and keep focused.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Ewan, do you want to add anything?
You're catching me off guard a bit here, Keith. Every time with these.
Oh yeah, it was a wild ride we're coming on here, though.
Yeah, I quite enjoy the randomness of it all. I was going to say a wee bit provocative, maybe, but I think we've got to sometimes turn. This is more of a general point. Sometimes we've got to watch that we really understand in your world, for example, in service and O&M. I think sometimes you've got to turn the organisation on its head. It'd be interesting. The real litmus test maybe in 2021 is. This is not answering the question, it's the point I wanted to make earlier. In 2021, the real litmus test is seeing what the technicians really feel it's like out there. I would echo the point that Hugh made about where folks are living. I was going to extrapolate that a bit further to say, I would challenge that on the call today, we're more or less all the same. Whereas if you turn it right round in itself, turn the pyramid over, there's the base of that pyramid's out there working today. We've got people right out, as we all do. And I think that's the voice of the customer for me. I would really like to hear a bit more from them in 2021 and 2022. I guess the other point there was the other bit that Ian made about the new technologies coming through and everything else. We're going to see a whole load of new skill sets required. So I'm not answering the question at all, I know, but I wanted to get the point across about flopping this pyramid over, because I think that's really, really important. Far too often health and safety can be this rather siloed, and we think we're doing all the right things and sometimes completely missing the dartboard. So there's my wee provocative challenge for 2021 is to turn it right round and get some feedback from those that are the customers at the end of the day.
Oh, excellent. Thanks, Ewan. No, really good. I guess that's the point of this session, to try and get to dig in a little bit deeper into stuff. So, yeah, David, do you want to add some comments there, David? Yeah.
It's a simple one for me, and it goes back to COVID, and it's the immediate thing that I'm concerned about is, we're looking at projections, we'll be vaccinated by Q2, and certain parties believe this. There's going to be a rush to accelerate projects to recover lost ground, and most of the safety professionals on the call and in the groups and all that know that if you don't manage these kind of activities well, you start to get an increase in incidents and people, ill health, because changes are made, things are pushed faster than what they should be. So it's just urge people just to take that second, and maybe even using some of the lessons we've learned off of this session today. Think of the human factors of the people that we're asking to do the job. Is it feasible? Are we being realistic? And just take the time to plan the works properly.
Yeah, great. Thanks, David. Yeah, and just finally for me, I think for me it's, the world in the future is not going to get less complex. That's one thing for sure. But all of the things we've been talking about, it's going to get more complex. And I think from a safety perspective, it's all about leadership and collaboration, which is what this organisation is about. That's how you deal with complexity, is leadership and collaboration, and moving the agenda along from being purely about maybe bureaucracy and documentation and moving it onto those sort of things. And that's certainly where I see things.
Keith, could I make just one final remark? Is there just a few seconds for that?
No, but go on.
Right, just literally a few seconds. Just the point about
the hook being pulled at me at the moment.
Right,
so
just the point about cost and investment, and Trevor did make that point, and I think that's the takeaway again. It's the investment, not the cost, and that's such a powerful remark. So I'll just leave it at that.
Brilliant. Thanks. Great. That's it. So thanks everybody. Thanks for all the contribution. Thanks for all the questions. I know there's some questions that we didn't get around to answering. And we've made a commitment, we'll follow up on those afterwards. But yeah, really appreciate the contribution of everybody. and all the questions that we had from the floor as well, which is really, really good. So as I'm over time, I'll dive off and hand back to Lindsay. So there you go.